Hi and welcome. This is Dimitar Nikolov, your AI, and in this lesson I will show you how to set up a cluster environment using the cm cluster and cm Hadoop commands. There is one prerequisite for this tutorial, which is to have set up the Cloudmesh client. And if you haven't, you can go to the lessons page on the course website, and towards the very top you can click on Cloudmesh Client on Ubuntu 16.04. This will walk you through how to install the Cloudmesh Client and some of the setup tasks that you need to do. And what we're going to be doing today is also based on one of the lessons on this page. So if you scroll down more towards the bottom, you're going to see Hadoop Virtual Cluster installation. This is what we're going to be going over today. The first thing that we actually want to do is make sure that Cloudmesh Client is up to date. And the way we do that is basically uninstall and then install Cloudmesh Client. When we do that, we're not going to have to do all of the configuration steps that were necessary the first time we installed Cloudmesh Client. So it's not going to take long. What you need to do first, though, is make sure that all of your VMs have been deleted or terminated. So to do that, I can check what VMs are running currently. And I'm only set up to use Chameleon Cloud, so I don't have to check any other clouds. So when I do cm VM list, this tells me all of the VMs that are running. And if I just want to look at the one for my username, I can use the grep tool in Linux. And this tells me that I only have one VM running named Dimitar002. So to delete it, I do VM delete and then the name of my VM. And after that, I need to reset the local database for Cloudmesh Client with the reset command. So once all of this is done, I can uninstall Cloudmesh Client using pip. Say yes to the prompt, and then I'm going to install Cloudmesh Client again, just like you did the first time you installed it. And it shouldn't take very long because you'll have all of your libraries. Okay, so once this is done, there's only a couple things we need to do. We need to do refresh on, and then we need to add our SSH key again. And so from here, we're ready to go. You can verify that your installation works by just starting the Cloudmesh shell and making sure that it works. And now we're going to see how to create a cluster environment in Cloudmesh. We can do all of the cluster management in Cloudmesh using the cluster command. And remember that Cloudmesh is built using the CMD module, and so we can always put the name of a command like cm cluster and then help, and this will tell us all of the different options for this command. So let's just look at some of them. The first thing that you always need to do is define a cluster environment, and so you would use cm cluster define, and you need to specify how many nodes you want to have in the cluster. So here I want to keep things easy and fast, so I'm just going to use one node. In your case, you're going to want to use 2 or 3, but not more, because we have limited resources in the class. So I'm going to define a configuration like this, and at any time I can check what available configurations are there using the avail command. So here I have only one, and just for the sake of seeing some of these commands, let's create another one. So we'll do cluster define, and this time let's say that we want 5 nodes. And doing avail again, we should see both of our configurations, and the arrow that you see over here means that this is the active configuration. Now I maybe realized that I don't want to use 5 nodes, and what I need to do in that case is undefine this configuration. So it's cluster undefine and then the name. And the next time I do avail, I should only see my cluster 5 configuration. And if you have multiple configurations, you can change the active one by using cm cluster use. So in this case, I don't need to do it, but if I do, I can make sure that cluster 5 is the active one. So once you've defined your configuration, the next thing you want to do is actually deploy it on Chameleon Cloud. And to do this, all you have to do is issue the allocate command. Remember that in Chameleon or in Cloudmesh YAML, you've defined things like the active cluster and things like that, so you don't have to specify all of that information when you issue these commands. So we're just going to do cm cluster allocate, and this is going to set up the cluster environment we defined on Chameleon Cloud. This takes a while, so I'm going to pause here and we're gonna come back when the cluster has been set up. Okay, our cluster has now been deployed on Chameleon Cloud, and the way that we can verify this is using the list command. So I see cluster 005, and I can also look at the list of nodes that exist for the cluster by using the nodes command. And right now I get into a debug shell because there is some error that occurred. This might not be the case for you by the time that you use this version of Cloudmesh Client, because this might be something that we fix. But if you do see it, all you need to do here is press C and then enter, and this shows you the list of nodes that are part of the cluster. In my case, I only have one. This is the name, and it has its IP address. And so from here, I can always SSH to whatever node I want by specifying its name in VM SSH. So I can do this, and the SSH key that I set up initially when I installed Cloudmesh Client is going to be used, and as you can see, I am now logged on to my node on Chameleon Cloud, and I can start doing my processing. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of here, and what we're going to do next is see how to clean up our clusters. So let's say that you've done your work on the cluster, and you can maybe copy the files that you've created there to your local machine or to your Ubuntu VM. Since the nodes in the cluster are have their own IP address, you can use SCP or a similar tool to transfer files between the cluster and your own machine. So let's say that you've done that, and you want to clean up your cluster environment. We really appreciate it when you do that, because we have a limited allocation, and so we really would like you to only use Chameleon Cloud when you need it, and once you're done, delete your VMs or cluster configurations. So to do that, we need to issue the delete command and specify the name of the cluster. So we can use cluster list to get a list of what we have, and in this case I'm going to delete cluster 5. And so what this does is it removes the cluster from Chameleon Cloud. Now you still have your configuration that you created earlier, so if you remember, you can do cm cluster avail, and you can see we still have this configuration. This is saved in the local database, so it's going to remain available. And so if you want to start the same configuration, you can keep it and then just do cluster allocate. If you want to delete it, you can use cluster undefined, which we saw before, and specify the name. So if you want to completely erase the work that you've done, you first have to do a delete to remove the cluster from Chameleon Cloud, and then you want to do an undefined. And so once you do that, you're all done. And what we're going to do next is look at how to set up a Hadoop environment on Chameleon Cloud. Okay, to create the Hadoop environment, we need to do two things. One is set up a cluster and deploy it on the cloud. So this is something that you already saw how to do. And the second thing is we need to set up the Hadoop infrastructure and make sure that is deployed to our cluster configuration. So let's go through these steps. I'm going to, since I just deleted my available cluster configurations, I need to create another configuration. So I'm going to use define, and once again I'm only going to use one node. And then from here, before I do any allocation or deployment, I need to define the Hadoop infrastructure. So there's a Hadoop define command that we need to execute first, and right now we're not using any add-ons, so we just say Hadoop define, and you can see what Hadoop environments are available by using Hadoop avail, and we have one environment, stack 001. So just like with cluster, we can change between different environments using the use command. We can delete them using undefined and so on. So these commands correspond pretty closely. And the next thing that we need to do with the Hadoop command is sync. So this is actually going to check out the current big data stack from GitHub and fetch all of the modules that we're going to need. So this is going to take a little bit of time, but after it's done, we're going to have our Hadoop environment set up and ready to be deployed. So just be patient here. And after the big data stack has been set up, we need to deploy our Hadoop cluster. And so remember, we used to say cm cluster allocate to deploy our cluster earlier. In this case, we don't need to do that. We just need to make sure that the currently active cluster configuration is the one that we need, so cluster 07 in this case, and then we'll just deploy Hadoop, and Hadoop is going to use this currently active cluster configuration. So I'm just going to put in Hadoop deploy, and this step takes a while, so it might take about 10 minutes. So just be patient, and at the end you're going to have a fully working Hadoop environment. The last thing we're going to do is show you how to set up Pig with some useful add-ons. In particular, we're going to install Spark and Pig in addition to Hadoop. And the way to do this is very easy with Cloudmesh Client, and it's not really very different from what we have just done. There are two steps. One is set up a cluster configuration, and the second step, set up your Hadoop configuration. And I've just reset my environment, so I don't have any cluster or Hadoop configurations here. So avail shows nothing. And so I want to create a cluster configuration with a single node. And then I want to create a Hadoop configuration with two add-ons, Spark and Pig. And all I need to do is add these at the end of the define command. The way that I know I can add these is if I do cm Hadoop add-ons, this will give me a list of all the available add-ons. And so in addition to Pig and Spark, we have some other ones like HBase and Hive. And so once this is done, all I need to do is Hadoop sync to clone the big data stack from GitHub. And after that, I need to do a Hadoop deploy, which is actually going to deploy everything on Chameleon Cloud. And remember that the deploy takes a while, so you need to be patient. And once done, you'll be able to use Hadoop cluster nodes to find out what the IP addresses of the nodes that were created are, and then you'll be able to SSH to them and start your work. Okay, so let's do Hadoop deploy, and then we just wait.